And I think we will get started with some introductions here and get things rolling, and people can join in as they do. So I wanted to say good afternoon and thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to our first webinar from our Women in Cybersecurity, Privacy Law, and Policy affiliate. I'm Danielle Strimbu, the events chair for the affiliate, and just kind of a student at University of Denver, working on my graduate degree in cybersecurity and information systems security. So I'm thrilled to have you all here with me today. Some housekeeping. We have a great group of individuals today and wide variety of backgrounds. However, none of them are attorneys, so none of the information provided today in the webinar will be legal advice. So just kind of keep that in mind, please. Quickly go over our agenda. We're going to do some quick introductions of our panelists and jump into the important conversation around medical data concerns since the overturning of Roe. We'll ask some moderated questions to our panelists and then leave some time for questions from the audience near the end of the discussion. For any questions that come to mind during the panel, please send them in the chat and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can as possible at the top of the hour. So today we have joining us Missy Griffin, who is the Vice President of Quality and Patient Safety at Skyridge Medical Center. We have Barbee Mooneyhan, who is the Chief Information Security and Privacy Officer at Woebot Health. Quintana Patterson, IT Clinical and Compliance Manager for the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. And Kimberlyn Lopez, the Compliance and Privacy Manager at Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest. So to get our session started, I wanted to kick off with a couple of quotes to kind of help set the framework for our discussion today. First one is from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. In Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court held that the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause protects against state action the right to privacy, including a woman's qualified right to terminate her pregnancy. And that though the state cannot override that right, it has legitimate interest in protecting both the pregnant woman's health and the potentiality of human life. Striking this balance of interest, Roe v. Wade effectively stopped the enforcement of many state laws that banned abortion before 24 weeks. The Supreme Court later reaffirmed it with the Planned Parenthood v. Casey that the fundamental right of privacy protects citizens against governmental intrusion in such intimate family matters, and that a state law would violate the Due Process Clause if it creates an undue burden on a pregnant person's right to choose. The majority opinion in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization explicitly rejects the notion that abortion constitutes a protected liberty under the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause. It states that the Due Process Clause only protects rights that are deeply rooted in this nation's history and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty. So I know a lot of people, this brought to mind a lot of questions around our privacy, and we have seen some hiccups with apps, social media, and health providers hit the news recently. So I also want to talk about a quote from the Georgetown Voice. Medical apps failed to store data securely even before the overturn of Roe v. Wade, with reports of the apps being used to target users with certain advertisements or to determine insurance coverage or loan rates. The protections provided by HIPAA are under fresh scrutiny, with many pushing for adjustments to better address technological advancements. Currently, HIPAA applies to covered entities like healthcare plans and providers, but it is limited to domestic providers and does not cover all internet activity. So let's get our esteemed members of our panel to give some perspectives on this. Missy, I'm going to direct this first one to you. The 1996 Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act, or HIPAA, protects medical file privacy at our doctor's office, but not medical information found in third-party apps. So with that in mind, do you think we need to be considering removing health apps from our devices? And if we should, or should not, excuse me, what should we be doing to protect that information that we're putting in those medical apps?
Yeah, I think that it varies from app to app. I think that a lot of people don't have a great understanding of what's protected for them. They have a basic understanding of HIPAA, and that equates to many people, my health information is protected and can't be shared. I think a lot of people download an app and assume that HIPAA applies to that. They don't read the 30-page waiver that they're probably clicking yes to. Even if they do, I think that we see a lot of inability for patients and people to process through those legal terms when they read those 30 pages and really understand what they're signing. I think we've seen a huge increase from physicians and the use of portals, which has brought about a whole lot of problems besides just privacy. And I think that a piece of it is the responsibility of the physician and hospital to talk to their patients about whether their information is protected through that. Most of those apps or logins through the computer system should be protected by HIPAA, but other apps that they're downloading probably aren't protecting them in the same way.
Yeah, okay. Barbee, what do you think?
I'd actually like to, because I like how you said that the conversation around whether or not it's protected health information, because we have health information, we deal with health information on a regular basis with apps, but it's up to the providers and entities, to the covered entities, to ensure that they're explicit and clear when that information is being provided as part of their care, therefore part of the protection underneath of HIPAA, versus, hey, I recommend you to go use this app and tell me how you like it or whatnot. So those are two very different conversations. And covered entities do have business associates that whenever they work with other types of providers, other types of suppliers, that we have to sign the same forms, we have to, adhere to the same laws, and we have to ensure that we protect the data in the same manner. But if it is all within the relationship between that provider, between that covered entity and the tools that they're using and that they're providing to their patients. And some of them, yes, that data is being provided back to the provider. It's part of care and it is protected by HIPAA. And there's a distinction there. So we can't just say because it's an app on your phone, it's not protected by HIPAA. It's a misnomer, and we need to be very careful about that, because there are a lot of apps out there that are, depending on the relationship with the provider. And it's incredibly important for those providers to be providing that information to the patients in a transparent and very clear manner of, I have this relationship with this supplier. This is going to be part of your care, and this is what that looks like. This is what information transposed back and forth, and this is what that's going to look like. But that has to be within consent forms, and it has to be top of mind, and it has to be treated as if it was PHI as well.
Definitely. Quintana, working on the back end things. What do you think on this one? What are your thoughts?
I personally enjoy the fact that I can log on to my provider app and have access to all of my records. And, when I go visit another clinic, they have access to it. It makes it it makes it easy for me. I am one of those few people, because of the work that I do read that 30-page document that says, what exactly are you doing? What are you collecting? I mean, that's just, my habit, and it's kind of just what I've gotten into the habit of doing. But, my Fitbit app, not so much. Like, you want to track my menstrual cycle? Why? I don't need that. I know when my menstrual cycle is. I don't need you to tell me that. You know, so I think as consumers that we just need to be a little bit more aware of the apps that we're using. I think they're great. I love being able to count my steps, but that's pretty much all I want to use it for. Well, I use it, you know, when I exercise, just know how many calories I'm burning, but just knowing where exactly that's going. Most people probably are under the impression that this stays on my phone, but Fitbit is a cloud provider, so that information is going up to the cloud. So I think it's, I don't want to deter anybody from using it, but I think it's important that, you know, you do your homework and do your due diligence and read the privacy policy and really have a good understanding of what is going on with that information and where it's going and what they're doing to it. And, you know, just like with any app, you need to go in and, you know, look at the privacy settings. What can I request? What can I, you know, ask to be deleted? How do I delete my account if I'm done using it? I think that's all important of us as consumers to make sure that we take a look at.
Definitely. All right, Kimberlyn, what do you think? You're working in, you know, an area.
Yeah, I definitely just want to echo that distinction, because I think there's a lot of people that think this is a health app, so it's going to have my information, not really think about it. Especially with the menstrual cycle stuff. I know there's been FTC like has settled some issues with like the app flow is one of them, and Ovia as well. So because they're sharing data, these are for-profit apps that are not connected to the provider. So they're selling this data, like, you know, for marketing and stuff. So those are the things that you need to consider. Again, nobody wants to read that really long, where's my information going? Like, how are we sharing data? But it's really important, especially, you know, under these circumstances, to continue to just be a little bit more careful about the information that you're sharing.
Definitely. I know that there are some apps out there that are more geared towards actually working with doctors and things. My son has apps that work for his diabetes, for example, and reading through that information is definitely a challenge. So without something like GDPR that guarantees the ability to request the removal of records, what can we do to protect our data, and how do healthcare providers and healthcare apps provide an option despite that lack of regulations for removal? Barbee, let's start with you on this one.
I have a list of things. No. So this is, I think, especially given the context and information that has come out lately, and how some of this information can unfortunately be used, right? So it's up to us as companies to protect our users. And from an ethical perspective, when we really dig down into that, it's up to us as the professionals, as the people that are in charge of and protecting that data, to provide that data back, to provide information around that data. So regardless, you know, it's up to us to decide whether or not we're going to do it anyway. Can we do it anyway? Can we start having that conversation around doing it with the other executive leadership team, and start bringing it to the table, to the real risks that can be involved with mishandling data versus handling the data in an appropriate manner, and then all the benefits that can come along with handling data in an appropriate manner, including building trust with with the people that trust us with their data, to be able to ensure efficacy of our products, because they use them in the way that they're supposed to be and intended to be used, because they trust that we're not doing suspicious things to the data. So while, yes, I completely agree, like we need laws to be able to protect our people, but also us standing at the table and saying, hey, we demand to treat our people right as well. So I regularly have ethical conversations. I actually do fall underneath the GDPR as well. So we have a ton of those things. But even if not, it's an ethical conversation around what would the end user feel, how would the end user feel about us using the data in this way? If you were to call that person up right now and say, hey, I'm about to use your data in this manner, how do you feel about that? What do you think that the person's going to say? And a lot of times that gives pause to other people around me, where they're like, oh, ooh, yeah, okay. How would you feel if somebody called you up and said, this is how And I can see the really, really cool, like long-term benefit. I do think that there's a lot that needs to be pushed back to the companies to protect their people and protect their users. From a user perspective, though, we talked about the privacy policy. One of the things that I kind of wanted to point out, I know that we keep saying we don't want to read those 30-page documents, but they're there for a reason. The reason why there's laws made to have privacy policies is so that people can be knowledgeable about what we do with the data. So some of the key points that I always try to look at whenever I'm looking at a privacy policy is look for those rights, regardless of whether or not you're underneath of HIPAA or not. If it's personally identifiable information, if it's sensitive information, you may be saying information that you don't want, that has nothing to do with health. Of course, health is important as well, but that information is near and dear to you. So look for those same rights, even if they're not underneath of like a GDPR type structure, because a lot of us are adopting them anyway. The right to access your data, the right to correct your data, the right to be able to download your data, to be able to delete your data. Look for those before just kind of signing up for something. Be also looking for the opt-in and opt-out abilities. Can you opt out of advertisement? Can you opt out of analytics? There's a lot of people will say, hey, here's the link to go opt out of the analytics if you don't feel comfortable being part of this for this app. Look for cookie controls, look for do not track controls. Those are all parts and ways that you can take control of and understand what that privacy policy says. And then look for the transparency. So if you're just looking over it and you can't identify fairly quickly what data that they have of yours, how they're using that data, and who they're sharing that data with. If you can't quickly identify those three things, you need to take pause and you need to read a little deeper and really identify what they're doing with the data, because that's going to be those little gold nuggets. And then use your phone. Your phone has a ton of controls on it that you can deny it from outside of the app and just say, you know what, I'm going to turn GPS off for all these things. It's just a couple of things for me.
Okay. Now it's a little different in medical institutions themselves. Kimberlyn, what do you say with this kind of thing?
Well, I think in general, whoever releases medical records needs to be trained in when they should be releasing medical records. I think that's super important. I believe in, like, when somebody is requesting medical records, you definitely want it more centralized in a way that these people are trained. They're like health information management or technicians that are doing it, because there's a lot of, concern with, for example, a police officer coming into a clinic and being like, I need the information of this patient, and a medical assistant being like, okay, this is a police officer. So it's those kind of things. So I think training is very important when it comes to anybody that works in these healthcare facilities. I also think that as we were talking about, like, contracts and BAAs are super important. So if you're getting an app with somebody, make sure that you are going through a contract and reviewing a contract and making sure that their privacy and security is their priority when it comes to this stuff. And also, when that person has a BAA or when that third-party vendor has a BAA, then they also fall under HIPAA too. So they will also, it's not as easy as an app. An app can probably get, fined from the FTC, but HIPAA is a lot more stringent and when it comes to the rules.
That makes sense. Quintana.
I just want to add that, and I agree with everything that's already been said, but I do want to add that even if, an app does not fall under the HIPAA requirements, the FTC and they have like developer guidelines out there that if a vendor wanted to be like a good digital citizen, that they would follow those guidelines when developing the app. But one surefire thing to look for, and I got into this a lot at my previous employer, because that's kind of what I did for, teachers. They want the next greatest and best thing out there, and they'll just start using all these apps and, oh, my student does this, and, come to find out it collects this. But one thing that I tended to run into was a lot of these apps didn't even have a privacy policy. That's number one. If I didn't even see one, if they did not have one, I was like, absolutely not, because there's no way in the world that I can decipher what they're going to be doing with this, with the student data, or even if it's going to be used in the classroom. It's like, why do you need the student sex? Like, why do you need, if this is an educational tool, why are you collecting? And these are for, tools for students under the age of 13. So
Right.
those were like our guidelines. So like along the same lines of the privacy policy, if you're using a tool or you see this, your friend is saying, oh, look, check out this awesome app that does this and this, and you're like, oh, great. The first thing you should look at is if they have a privacy policy. And then, the once you're looking at it, the things that Barbee mentioned, those would be the things that you notice right off the bat. What are they doing with my data? What are they collecting? How are they doing it? Where is it stored? How do I collect? How do I ask for it? How do I delete my account? Those are the main factors that should be considered when looking at a privacy policy or considering, using an app. And, like I said, tools that want to be good and want to ensure that, they're putting their customers or users first will make sure that they're doing their due diligence to make sure that these aspects are included in that privacy, in that policy.
Yeah, definitely. Missy, I know you have a perspective in this to some extent from the medical side with doctors that use specialized apps for communication about their patients. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think similar to what everyone has said, the companies own a piece of that ethically. We as a hospital need to ensure the companies that we're using to track medical records, to provide physicians to enter data on their iPads, that all of those have certain things in place to protect the consumer, and that they do fall under our BAAs, which makes them fall under HIPAA. My bigger concern is the general public and the outside apps that don't have to do with their healthcare, like the Fitbit that Quintana mentioned. And, I heard Barbee say a lot about the consumer's responsibility, which yes, it is, but I see so much right now with healthcare literacy and technology literacy that the average American, I don't think, understands what a cookie is on their computer. And so that's putting a lot of pressure back on those companies. And, I'd like to see more laws simplify the explanation to consumers versus a 30-page document that mentions a bunch of terms I don't understand. So therefore, I really want it to track my heart rate. I'm not going to read the 30-page document and see that they're also tracking my menstrual cycle. So I think that's where we need to do more effort. I think we're pretty secure within healthcare. We're held to those laws. We're going to be safe. We're going to make sure we have agreements with legitimate companies who are ethical. But where's the ethical tracking of those companies for the average consumer outside of healthcare?
Yeah, Missy, we have plenty to worry about within healthcare besides the apps. We have devices that are connected to the internet. Oh, sorry. I'm thinking about my day,
No,
things that keep me up at night. It's like, oh my gosh, healthcare is just a whole different realm of.
definitely. I mean, if you watch medical dramas at all, you see all the horrors of the fun that they have with cyber attacks. So definitely keeps you all on your
Absolutely.
toes in that area.
Yeah,
So
nothing
So
keeps
there's-
you up longer than seeing a patient pump get ransomware on it.
ooh, I don't even want to think about that one.
Missy, to your point, I mean, there's key concepts of privacy that companies need to continue to enforce. Like, do we need the data? We don't. Why are we collecting it? Right? It was said just a moment ago. Why do you have to know what somebody's sex is in an educational app? If we don't need the data, don't use the data. Data minimization. How long do we have the data? What are we processing the data for? Don't keep data around just because one day it might become valuable, or you might think of a way to analyze it because it's super fancy. And you might be able to get a little insight out of it, 3 years from now. So there's a lot from our perspective as well that we should be applying, both from the healthcare perspective and for those apps that are kind of in that in between, that store health-ish data, but not protected underneath of HIPAA.
Yeah. Now, you all have kind of touched on this next one a little bit, but there's been a lot of discussion about privacy and security concerns around apps and hardware, like Apple's newest generation watch, which is coming out, that track menstruation, they track ovulation, they track fertility. The new watch is going to be tracking temperature changes to help facilitate some of this. How do these apps fit into the current privacy landscape as you all see and interact with it? And are those concerns that people have overhyped, or are they right on target? Quintana, let's start with you.
Don't use them. Stop it. I think personally, and this is a complete personal statement, I think the more it's overhyped, the more that people will start to pay attention to it. Because if you kind of try and glaze over it and make it seem like it's not that big deal, we're programmed to, go with the consensus. But then that could also have the opposite effect of you hype it up too much. People are like, oh my God, you're just being so over dramatized until something happens. It's never until something happens that it becomes a big deal. It's not until Apple gets hacked or, they found out they're selling information on the black market that people are like, oh my God, Apple's the devil. You shouldn't be using it. But that's my opinion anyway. But, I'm just kidding. I hate the fact that they came out with a watch that knows the difference between a breaststroke and a freestyle. That upsets me because I won't buy it. I still won't buy it. But I think even more now, I'm just hoping with all of the technology and advancement that's going to be part of this, that people really will kind of take their data in their own hands and really start to dig into what these apps are doing or what they're collecting. Yeah, the features are great. They come in handy. I mean, they're useful, but I think as a society, we're getting to the point where we're really diligent about how our data is being used and where it's going and how it's stored. And I think, and somebody posted a question in the chat about, state laws for apps. I mean, California is the closest that we have as to GDPR in the States. That's the closest thing that we have. And we're hoping, Colorado has a privacy law that's being passed that comes effective in January. And, Utah, Connecticut, Virginia, there's one more. There's 5.
Yeah, I can't think of the other one off the top of my head, but I know there's one more.
California, Colorado,
Massachusetts,
Virginia, Utah, Connecticut.
Connecticut.
And I'm hoping that sooner or later that all these states really, even the people, start advocating for themselves to get these laws in place. And hopefully, there'll be some mandate or direction for these apps and what they can and can collect, or at least giving the patrons an option to, have the same functionality on a website that they do in the app with regards to where's my data at? Where's it going to be stored? How can I delete it? That kind of thing. And I think it's going to be, I think Missy mentioned, it's going to be up to the people to kind of like advocate for this. Like, this is something that we need. This is something that needs to be put in place because, the manufacturer's out for it for their money. Let's add this new feature in there to try and get more patrons, more uses, more, that leads to more ads and more, more money going into their pockets. So I think it's going to be a matter of either stop using it until you get this, or something bad happening to get it implemented. But we want something in the middle before it gets to either one of those extremes.
Yeah,
I
thank you,
also-
Barbee, for
Oh,
dropping that privacy legislation tracker into the chat. That's definitely very helpful. I know I've used it frequently. And so you were going to say something, Kimberlyn, I think?
Yes, I was gonna say like you were saying, like it sucks that something needs to happen where there's a breach and stuff. What sucks even more is that people are like, well, it didn't happen to me. So even if there's a breach and you were not the person affected, that's when you actually start caring. I was thinking about, like acts and regulations that we either have or are looking forward to moving forward, which was the My Body, My Data Act that basically Democrats came up with after, the post-Dobbs legislation. So it basically protects protective health data. But then there's also Massachusetts, which has nothing to do with, something to do with like, abortion access, but basically like banning geofencing near clinics so that people cannot capture or share the information if somebody is around a clinic. So I thought that one was pretty cool. And I feel like that should be one of those things that just gets expanded to everybody else.
Yeah, interesting. Barbee, Barbee, on this, what do you think we can do in addition to the question? What do you think we can do in terms of advocating for the change?
I wish I had a really good answer for this. I mean, we keep talking, right? Like we keep having these conversations. We keep trying to keep people at the table to be informed. We do encourage individuals to, if there's no privacy policy, guess what? If there's no privacy policy and nobody downloads the app, guess what they're gonna start doing? If they start acting right and we start being able to read transparently what they're doing, then we can start using their apps. But I do think it's a hard world where it's so easy. We're in this, like, I mean, TikTok's a great example, right? Like, we're in this very easy download. I talk to my nieces all the time about it, where I'm like, what's happening here, right? And we talk through all the data pieces that's collected and all the things that could be like sent to all the different places. But I mean, that the obvious answer is to keep trying to get laws passed and keep trying to make sure that we're moving the needle. And then as the companies push for integrity, push for ethics, push to make sure that we're making the right choices as well.
Definitely. Missy, anything to add?
I think that the nail was hit on the head with, we're in denial a lot of times, right? Well, it's not going to happen to me. They're not going to track my data. Or we look at the outcome. I know my sister-in-law was telling me about some new, rubber ring you can put on that tracks your calories. And, to her, it's like, I just want to lose weight. I can wear this ring and it's going to make my life easy and I'm going to lose weight. She hasn't given a thought to what else is that gathering from you and what are they going to do with that data. So I think the average consumer just, until it happens to them, is in denial, and they look at the potential outcome far more important than what potentially could happen to their data.
Sometimes I think if it happens to somebody close enough to them to make them give pause, they're like, oh, well, that's like in my circle. So, and we're kind of doing the same thing. So maybe I should look at this. But again, it's like you want to educate before it even gets to that point. But sometimes, like you said, it didn't happen to me. I'm not worried about it.
And I think starting with our kids, like Barbee was saying, like they don't know any different. This technology has been a part of their life from the second. I mean, they learned how to use an iPad before they learned to walk, some of them. So that they take that for granted too. And even college age kids right now, I had to have a huge talk with my kids about your social security number, as simple as that is. Like, why do you need to put that on your test packet? That doesn't need to be something that's turned in. So it's prevalent across education, healthcare, everything, and just teaching people what they should and should not give. And like you said, asking why. Why do you need that?
Yeah, I still can't. I've had that conversation with my son. I don't know why he still thinks it's okay to like, oh, send me a picture of my social security card. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. No.
Yeah.
Why would I
or
do
even
that?
just a text message that lists it. Yeah, they have no concept.
He was like,
That's
well, it's
definitely
just in
a
a text
challenge.
message. I'm like, it's going to like 3 different clouds if I do that.
Yeah. And
Definitely.
even adults, I feel like every website that I go to now, it's like, accept all cookies. And I'm like, why do I need to accept all these cookies? Or an app that says like, you really need to share your location.
Right.
You're a recipe app. I don't need to show you where I live in order for you to give me, instructions on how to make a turkey. So I think that's super important. There's sometimes I turn on apps, I immediately go into the app and turn off all of those extra things that they say, like, you kind of need this. So I think just maintaining your apps and looking at apps that are made by bigger developers might be a good approach to look into things. Because they tend to have a lot more responsibility. Sorry, my dog is like impatient.
Totally good. And totally good. You're actually shifting right on into the next kind of topic I wanted to talk or touch base on, which is, what kinds of personal information should we be refraining from putting into apps, putting out there on social media? I know that's kind of a double-edged sword in some ways, especially with social media, because we want to be sharing. We want that validation in some ways of, we're being a good parent, we're being a good friend, whatever that is. So what kind of information shouldn't we be putting out there? Kimberlyn, I'll start with you this time.
I think, especially with social media, there's a lot that gets shared there. I mean, Facebook has security stuff that you can basically keep all your stuff private, even groups that you join. So if you are, pro-choice and somebody sees that you're in this group, you could also keep that, like, you could hide that as well. Specifically about like how to hide the information if you want to hide it. I mean, don't search Google. Google has history, Google history that people could use. And basically you could get subpoenaed, like Google could get subpoenaed to get that information. I think Google at this point has probably over 100,000 subpoenas and court orders sent to them this year. So I think that's really important. So there's applications or like search engines like DuckDuckGo is more private. Then we have, I believe it's Firefox's, I think it's called Focus, which is more private search engine. And then you could also do the incognito in Google as well. So there's a lot of different ways in order for you to be able to hide what your searches are. And social media, just basically be smart about it in terms of like what the information you're sharing. Not everybody, I mean, there's a reason why we're post Dobbs. There's people that are going to disagree with you. So I mean, working in Planned Parenthood, that's all you know about me. I don't post anything that is anything that I don't need to, because of the fact that, I'm super conscious about people reading it. And just basically having a history of it in general.
Missy, I know you've got 3 20-ish aged kids. What do you say on this one, and how do you work with them on this?
I think that's the age that lacks the most common sense. So it's a lot of explaining to them. Again, they take it for granted. They've grown up using these tools from the time they were little. They don't realize, that someone can put together your birthday with where you go to school, with your address, with your home state. They also don't understand password security. I mean, I can't tell you, they're all probably have the name of their dog and their birthday as their password. So a lot of conversations about that too, like what clues have you left on the internet that's going to allow me to guess your password? So basics, they're starting to learn the permanency of what's out there too. A few of them have had experiences with their friends, which again, when it's your inner circle that it affects, as they go to apply for jobs and posts resurface from long ago, things that you thought were deleted and they really still exist out there. Even as Snapchat became more popular, them thinking, oh, I take a snap and I send it and it disappears. And no, not necessarily. So really kind of talking to them about that.
Barbee?
So is the question around the children part, or is the question around like
more about how to keep our information protected? What do we need to be doing when we're out there on the internet, when we're out there using those apps?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has just provided such good advice so far, so it's great to hear this. One of the things that I always try to keep in mind, and especially with I have a young child, is that we talk openly quite often about what I do as my job, and why we don't put things online, and why I don't let her picture be taken at school and posted, and like we talk regularly on that because it really bothers her, because she's like, oh, my friends get to do it but I don't, and I'm like, but you're not old enough to be able to think through what that might look like, or what that might be. And I don't want you to regret something later in life because you weren't old enough and in the mindset, in an able mind to make those decisions for permanent record. And so we talk about that a lot. Like, she's not allowed to do YouTube and all those good things that I see out there. But really, I like to strip mine as well. I have this, we talk often about like the farther we get into security and privacy, the more of like a tinfoil hat we get on. And the more like everybody's like, oh, but you're really into IT and you're really into security and privacy. You should have all the things in your house. And I'm like, no, it's quite the opposite. I like dumb down my technology as much as possible. And I retract a bit. But I do want to point out that there's a lot of benefit to some of this as well. I know that it's really easy just to say, no, get it off the phone. But if you do have a chance to have a relationship with a really good company and you can trust that company and you know that company is ethical and you know you can get really good value out of it. I mean, that's that first part is the important part, right? But you can get really good value out of some of these applications. You just have to be really knowledgeable about it. We can't make decisions on the fly. And we also have to make sure that we make the companies themselves more responsible for their part as well. We can't just lay it all on the consumers because consumers have to protect themselves. Like, that's not right. We don't victimize, really. We don't take the victims and say, hey, victims, why didn't you protect yourself better? We need to start holding accountable the other side. But until then, really taking advantage of making sure that you're protecting yourself is where we're at. So one of the things that I do want to point out, though, is that, one, choose apps that allow you to control your data. Look at, if nothing else, look at the privacy policy and find out whether or not you have control, and if they have language around, do you have rights? Is it your data, or do they consider it to be their data? Because personal data should be yours, not theirs to do what they please. So if you have controls over your data, make sure that while you're using it, only do what you're comfortable with. And also make sure that if you're ready to disconnect the relationship, because oftentimes we see the information still out there because we didn't dismantle our accounts properly. And so you have to, again, if you have commitment with that relationship, with that I call them partners, even though they're companies, right? They're your partner. With that partnership, then you contact them and you say, I'm ready to end this. That privacy policy is a contractual agreement. Your terms of service, that what you're reading, those are contractual agreements with you and that company. And so you contact them and you say, hey, I want you to delete everything. I want to download, if you want to, I want a download of all the information that you have of me. Please delete my data and delete my account. And again, unfortunately, here in the United States, oftentimes we get where if there's no privacy policy, they don't have those rights, things to that nature. But that's really making sure that we're making good choices on what we're downloading in the first place.
Quintana, do you have any last thoughts on this?
I resonate with everything that everybody said, especially you, Missy, because my son, who's 25, and he's almost on the side of like the aluminum foil hat, because he's like, oh my God, the internet does this and this, but this is the same kid who wants me to text him his social security number. I will leave with this. So I was at a conference last week, and one of the keynote speakers took somebody's random iPhone. I'm using iPhone again. And it had a security code on it. And just by asking like random questions, just having a conversation with her, he was able to break into her phone. He asked, what's your paternal grandfather's name? And what year did you graduate college? And like, just like really random questions. And as the more questions he asked, by the time he got into it, that's when her hesitation started to come up, but he was already in her phone.
Oh, no.
And
That's
I'm
not a good thing.
And we watched him like do this, like just like random questions. And, and I speak again, personally, even I do this for a living. My son went away to college. The second month there, he was subject to, his bank account got hacked. Why? Because it was one of those instances where it was too good to be true. And I was like, that doesn't sound like, he was explaining it to me. And I'm sitting here like, you gave him your what? Why would you give him your bank information? Like, why would you do that? That didn't sound like, didn't that, so it's like, it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't matter how much education you give or provide, people are gonna do what they wanna do. And it's not until something like that happens or something, again, back to the things will change when things get worse or when something bad happens. But I think it's just a matter of, education, education, education. We don't want it to get to the point to where people are so desensitized that they don't believe it. And you don't want to get to the point where they're over afraid. Because like Barbie said, you can get in a relationship or a partnership with a good company, reputable, authentic, that lives by, that CIA triad for real, and, still feel comfortable doing business. And I just wanted to make a note that, you want to make sure that you own your business, your personal data. I don't know if you knew this about HIPAA, but you do not own your health data. The entity does, the hospital owns your data. So, but because that data is protected under HIPAA, you do have some rights with regards to that. But that was something, I learned working at a university / hospital. It's like, oh, my data is not really mine. It belongs to the hospital, but I still, that's that trusted relationship that you have with that entity. So.
Yeah,
Interesting.
managing
Something I never
the,
thought about.
yeah, managing the medical records department. It sucks to have to tell people like, yeah, we deleted that data. They're like, but it's my data. I was like, no, it's ours, and our database is really big, and we just need to, California has 7 years, minimum to keep your data. So, and we kept on, sorry, I want to just throw this out there. Kept on mentioning education of the patient, but also emphasize education of the people that work in these hospitals and stuff, talking to them about cybersecurity. We have so many people working remotely, use your VPN, make sure that you don't have PHI just saved on your desktop or drives and stuff that people could have access to. There's remote desktop cybersecurity attacks. So just the education in general, like everybody that works in a healthcare center, regardless, has PII. So it's, protecting that data is super important.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I think we've come to the end of the questions that I had kind of prepared for you. So I think we'll move on to the couple of questions we've got from our audience here. From Amy, will there be a time when the privacy laws will be different across the states for apps? Barbie, why don't you start with this one?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on this a little earlier, but right now, yeah, absolutely. And so we get a more solid federal, national law. It's already happening. We have multiple states. Quintana, you did an amazing job of naming off which ones they were. We have multiple states coming 2023 that they're going live. Like we have to adhere to them in 2023. They were passed this year. And so just like for law's sake, you pass a law and then there's like time to like adjust to that law. And then but then there's a time in which that law then becomes enacted and you are responsible for that law. And so we had a lot of laws passed this year and last year. And then they're all, like 5 of them are being enacted in 2023, including improvements to the California law. So absolutely, right now, yes. And then you also have to consider, I don't know, we're talking about the United States right now, but you have to consider the fact that each country has their own law too. And then subunits of those countries also have laws. And then it depends on what the data is used for there as well, and who it's used for. And so, or who it's processed for. So just a couple of things on that as well. So from a global perspective and from a United States perspective, we are very we are very disjointed in how we address this types of situation.
Yeah, we are. We definitely are. Quintana, do you think that there's going to be a time when they will be, I know she asked if they will be different, but do you think there's a time when we will see more consistency across those?
That's almost, this is not a political topic, but
No.
something like that would be political, that they would make that political. it would have to be, well, you know, Kentucky doesn't do the same thing as Colorado, so our rules shouldn't have to be applied. Or there'll come a day when there is a federal law, but then the states will like, well, this isn't applicable to us, or we need to adjust it this way. So I don't know. I think it would be great. It would be fascinating. Like, I'm happy that Colorado has something in place, even if it's not, I won't say it's the best, but it's something. And, you know, the
Mhm.
California law has been out for a couple of years, and now they're like completely revamping it and making it more strict, and, you know, and including things that weren't included in the original. So I think, you know, as these laws come along, I think things like apps and, you know, remote desktop or any of that, there are other things that can be added into it. I think the first step is to get the law out there, you know, and then let, so to speak, let the people decide what else needs to be there. I think apps would be something that'd be very difficult, just because developers, again, are out to make money. And, you know, they can say, oh yeah, we can put this in our privacy policy, but they don't actually do it. Because that would mean, oh yeah, here it is on the face, but if you do a deep dive into their company or what they're actually doing or what technology or environment, how it's set up, they don't match. And I've run into that now. So I don't know, it's a lifelong dream of mine, just like world peace.
There you go. The lifelong goals of every citizen. Missy or Kimberlyn, anything you want to add to that?
I just thought it was interesting when Barbie brought up other countries. I think we're seeing a huge influx, surprisingly, of people who are going out of the country to get medical care. It's always alarming to me being in healthcare, but things like bariatric surgery, dental work, things that aren't always covered here by their insurance, they're flocking there. I don't know that they're giving any notice to what does this mean for my medical records. Are they protecting me? What's going to happen when we start to buy our pharmaceuticals from Canada or Mexico? We're going to really have to look into that privacy as well. So again, I think, you know, it's on the people with the knowledge to share the knowledge and spread it, because I don't know that everyone knows what they don't know right now.
Definitely. Are there any consumer resources you all would recommend for searching how an app ranks in terms of its privacy policies? Anyone?
I don't know if there's any, I don't even know if there's actual ranking for that. But I think if you keep in mind the, you know, the 5 points that Barbie laid out originally, you know, just as long as it's laid out there, you know, what they're doing with your data, how it's collected, delete options, how is it stored? I mean, even if it's encrypted while it's in storage, and some, you know, some privacy policies do say it's stored at rest and in transit. I think just looking out for some of those key elements is how you can rate a privacy policy. I think anything that is really consumer based, like puts the customer first and lets you, it looks like that they're actually showing some concern for you, I think that would be a good one. But I don't know if anybody else knows of one that's actually a ranking out there for what a good privacy policy looks like.
If there's a list, I want it. Just if anybody finds it, that would be nice.
The one that I know of is actually run by Mozilla, their foundation, and it's a privacy not included, and it gives a creepy score for different products. I don't know if it does applications, but I do know it does things like your Ring cameras and your Nest thermostats and all of that to kind of see what kind of information you're sharing in those environments. So you might want to look that one up. All right. What kind of medical information can be used against an individual if they choose to move or travel to a different state? And Missy, you started to bring this up in terms of the international aspect for procedures in medical care. Is there information that can be used against them, or is that information still protected in some manner?
I think we haven't really nailed a good answer down on that. I think our physicians are very concerned about that. Patients coming in to our state, because we are supporting the abortion at different number of weeks than many in other states. And, you know, what does that look like when insurance kind of cross state lines? Your insurance company is going to have that information if you use that for a procedure. So what is their obligation going to be legally to report? I don't think we know yet, and it's scary.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Missy, because I think a lot of people, when we're thinking about like HIPAA and stuff, we're not really thinking about TPO, which is treatment, payment, and healthcare operations. We still have to share some information with certain people, even if you don't use your insurance. And let's say you get something prescribed. We still have third-party vendors like OptumRx that runs eligibility and says, oh, you actually have insurance. So your insurance ends up finding out, even if you didn't use that insurance. So I think that's very important for patients to know, that we live in an automated world where, you know, eligibility gets run the day before you come visit, you know. So when you show up to a clinic, you say, I actually don't want to use insurance on this. It might have already hit that insurance that you have a visit and stuff. So that's super important. I don't think that gets emphasized enough, that we still need to share information, and we're sharing this information for your care, but there's people that really just do not want to have their providers know, you know, their primary care providers know that they, you know, got a termination. Or even I had a recent complaint where somebody was just like, how does my doctor know that I got syphilis testing done at, you know, Planned Parenthood? And I was like, well, you have a Quest account. So it got sent out to a lab, and now your provider has access to that way. Or there's HIEs, health information exchanges and stuff. So there's certain things that we're doing as providers to help with your healthcare, but that patients are not aware that we share that information.
And on that same note, that's almost kind of scary, because if somebody really, like, you know, they travel to get a termination and they really don't want their provider to know, then are they going to go to a behind the building? You know, I know that's a terrible term for them, but that's what they used to do back in the day. You know, they go in the alley, you know, back to that kind of thing where nothing is tracked, where, you know, essentially the mother is putting herself in danger to keep herself safe almost. So, you know, that kind of, you know, that brings that to the forefront as well.
And this is
Yeah.
not cybersecurity-ish, but there's a lot of, I mean, we have those 18 indicators for like HIPAA, you know, there's protesters outside of our clinics. So these people could literally, I mean, you're talking about like what people could use against you. I mean, even going into a Planned Parenthood where you're going for birth control, these people some people are recording you and thinking, oh, or giving you information about abortion when you're just like, I'm just here to get a refill on my birth control kind of thing. So there's a lot. There's, you know, people taking video, there's people taking pictures of license plates and stuff just so that they could have this information on you. So out of the cybersecurity concept, like, where, like, if you're seeing protesters or want care, reproductive care, just stay vigilant. Been told to like cover your head with a hoodie, just be aware of those situations as well. So anything could be stigmatized, unfortunately.
Yeah, sadly, that's very true. Well, we are coming up on the hour here, so I do want to wrap it up. I want to thank you all, Missy, Barbee, Quintana, Kimberlyn, for taking time with us to discuss all of these issues around our medical privacy today. It's been an illuminating conversation. I know I've got some great takeaways from it. Hope other people do as well. Make sure to follow our WiCyS law, privacy law and policy group at WiCyS_PLP on LinkedIn and or Twitter, and keep up with the great latest news, opportunities, events that we're putting on, and continue the important conversations like these on social media. Thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.